Bob Johnson has become the poster child for black entrepreneurs, as well as the face of being called a sellout, after he would sell BET to Viacom for an estimate of $3 billion. For some, you can say Johnson did it, while others ask, is this the goal? Is it worth it more if we keep it with the family and help employ generations, or sell it for instant wealth?
Tell us, black entertainment television, what's it about for the cable television audience? Black entertainment television is the nation's first and only cable television satellite network distributing black programming on an advertising-supported basis to about 4.5 million cable households across the nation. Quality program. Quality black entertainment as we can find.
A black entrepreneur's dream is building something with the little that they've been given to one day build a creation that changes their life and their families. In recent times, we've seen black Americans entering new tax brackets, seeing new opportunities to make money, crediting their hustle and creativity. And for many, this is what to strive for. Or is it? According to reports in 2020, 2.4% of U.S. businesses with at least one or more employees have black owners, while a total of 3 million black-owned businesses existed according to the latest data from the Census Bureau. In comparison, black-owned businesses that have scaled to become publicly traded companies on the stock market make up of roughly just a total of 9 out of the 2,113 on the market as of December 2022. It appears that businesses that create true impact are still not black-owned.
The thing that gets to me is that we do not own anything that is life-changing. And what I mean by that, if you're going to buy a house, you got to go through a white bank or a white system. If you're going to jail, you're going through a white system. If you go to the hospital, medication's through a white system. I just would love for us to start thinking of things that are life-changing, things that we control. It seems like anything that has to do with life, we have to answer to somebody.
Ownership appears to be a much more personal relationship for black Americans. If you own it, you make the decisions. A strong contrast to early start of black people in America who found themselves spread out across roughly 45,000 plantations, a part of America's forced-free labor program known as slavery. Ownership will become a counter-response for some to feel free. Robert Louis Johnson, also known as Bob Johnson, was born in 1946 in Hickory, Mississippi, to his parents Edna, who was a school teacher, and his father Archie, who worked as a farmer. Being the ninth of 10 children, a young Johnson grew up in a full house. When Johnson was still a kid, his family would move to Freeport, Illinois. My only real entrepreneurial experience growing up was working a paper route. It was a morning paper route, and I couldn't get up in the morning. I was never a morning person, but the Rockford Morning Star had to be on people's doors by 6 and 7 a.m. And I'd get up in the cold morning and get dressed and walk up and down the street throwing papers. You had to do your own collection. You'd go get paid, and somebody would turn you down. And you have to deal with the rejection. And you'd have to go back to them again. That was the only experience I had where I was responsible for a business, as opposed to working on somebody's payroll. After graduating high school, Johnson would enroll in the University of Illinois, and in 1968 would graduate with a degree in social studies, and later would study public affairs at Princeton University before graduating in 1972. Upon graduating, Johnson would get his early start in the TV industry by moving to Washington, D.C. with his wife Sheila Johnson, where he would begin working for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which served as a nonprofit corporation created in 1967 that helped support public broadcasting. Soon after, Johnson would spend time with the National Urban League. He then would strategically set his sight on Capitol Hill. What I wanted to do is to understand how politics played a role in decision-making. Johnson would credit his new title as Vice President of the National Cable and Television Association to putting him in a position to make his biggest move. Upon taking out a $15,000 personal loan, Johnson would persuade John Malone of Liberty Media, who was also the then CEO of telecommunications, to invest $500,000 to start a channel tailored to black viewers. And in 1980, the network known as BET will launch, Black Entertainment Television. Malone would end up buying 20% of BET for $180,000 and loaned Johnson $320,000. BET was a business opportunity waiting for someone to put it together. To help further start the network, Sheila Johnson would help get the company's first office and would serve as the company's executive vice president of community affairs. At its start, the network would only air for 2 hours every week on Friday night on the Madison Square Garden Sports Network. BET would become known to air music videos and reruns of sitcoms. With its focus of filling a void in black representation on TV, it would catch on and begin to turn profit in 1985. Now, by 1991, BET became the first black-controlled company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. For Johnson, the mission was clear: get black faces in front of a black audience. Despite a seemingly strong launch, Johnson would face obstacles caused from racism and major companies undervaluing the black dollar.
So you face that kind of reluctance from people who don't understand. And clearly there's racism for people who wouldn't invest money with black folks because they don't believe we understand money and wealth and value creation. So you get that.
And it is noted that this racism would appear to be a reason, according to commentator Roland Martin, as to why a black-owned network like BET will become vulnerable with coming to an end. BET never got the same subscriber fees or advertising revenues as our peer group channels. Advertisers still discount the value of a black viewer, black subscriber, black reader, black consumer, but you just keep chipping away at it. I remember walking out of some advertising agency, almost in tears, trying to sell this product. I'm told by advertisers, well, blacks don't buy that product. And then I walk into any of my friends' houses and I see those products all over the kitchen. Or they tell me we don't need to reach the black consumer. Or we already reached the black consumer over regular TV. We over-deliver black households because they watch so much television. Many investors who would invest with a white entrepreneur would give them money 100 times faster than give it to an African-American entrepreneur. In the midst of building the network, and with Bob Johnson as its lead, BET's programming would represent the pulse of the people with shows like Teen Summit, BET News, Black College Football, Video Soul, Bobby Jones Gospel, Comic View, and special programming like Black Men Speak Out. The network appeared to be serving its purpose, but then, out of nowhere in November of 2000, BET would make headlines with the announcement that they were being sold to Viacom Incorporated after a deal worth reportedly close to $3 billion in stock. During its sale, BET was expected to generate $270 million in revenue that year and was reaching nearly 62.4 million homes. Johnson had been running the network for up to 20 years at that point. According to Johnson, who at the time owned 63% of the company, according to CNN Money, would be approached by Jewish billionaire Sumner Redstone, who had founded media giant Viacom, with a deal that for Johnson felt was the best way BET could sustain for years to come.
And John and I bought the company back private in '98. After that, after we had taken the company back private, how do we continue to grow it and at the same time create an exit strategy for Liberty Media? Now, about the time that we were looking to buy radio stations, AOL merged with Time Warner. And it occurred to us that this was sort of the highest valuation for media companies you'd ever see in a long time. And so John had had a conversation earlier with Sumner Redstone, where Sumner was looking to maybe buy Discovery from Liberty. John said Discovery wasn't for sale, and Sumner said, well, what about BET? And he said, well, I don't know if BET is for sale either. You should talk to Bob Johnson. Well, he called me, and I said, gee, Sumner, I don't think it's for sale. We might like you as a partner, but I'm not ready to sell. But I said, I'll talk to you. Later on, I went up, Deborah Lee and I went up and meet with Sumner and Mel, and we talked about it, and I asked him, he asked me what was my goal for BET, and I said to make it the preeminent African-American company in the world, and he said that would be our goal too at Viacom. And as we got to talk and got to get to know each other better, I'd known Sumner for over 20 years, Mel for about 10, I realized that here was an opportunity to make sure that BET was placed in a strong brand-oriented company like Viacom, and one that had a sensitivity to BET's independence. And so we struck a deal.
When the ink was dry, Viacom would acquire BET along with its $570 million debt. Viacom's president at the time, Mel Karmazin, would comment on the purchase, expressing that part of the motivation to get behind BET was to help speed up its worth and get past the network's racial barriers. Karmazin expected that his sales team could now hold advertisers accountable. How can you justify these lower rates other than discrimination? And obviously, you don't want to discriminate. BET has been getting its prices up, but we think we can accelerate the process. Blacks represent 13% of the population, but capture just 1% of advertiser spending, according to Christopher Dixon, USB Warburg's entertainment and media analyst. As for Johnson, the deal would make him the first black billionaire in America. But at home, things would appear to get rocky, and he and his wife Sheila would get a divorce a year later in 2002, in which she received a settlement reportedly worth $400 million. And to make things interesting, Sheila would later marry the judge who presided over her and Bob's divorce proceedings. According to reports, the two would first meet each other years before while acting in a stage play. In an interview with Roland Martin, Sheila would express why she thought the deal made sense and responded to critics who called them out for selling the network. You have to understand, when Viacom made the offer, it's about business. We would have been dumb to turn that down. You have to take that money and learn to grow it even larger. You just don't want to stay the same all the time. Otherwise, you lose your money. In 2017, Sheila's net worth was reportedly estimated at $750 million. BET will push ahead as expected, but will face a share of criticism. In the 2002 interview with CNN Money, Johnson will respond to people who grew concerned about BET's programming. As for critics who say our programming can be better, I'll tell them I'm not a programmer. I'm not going to go out to Hollywood with a truckload of cash and say, all you producers come up with the next big shows. That was never my thing, because I didn't see the connection between huge expenses in programming and advertisers stepping up their ad rates. They were only going to pay so much. That's why building a business targeted at blacks has always been and will probably always be a challenge. But I have this philosophy. It came from a buddy of mine that played football, and it's called Welcome to the NFL. If you play football, you put on a helmet, you walk inside those sidelines, you know you're going to get hit. That's part of the game. You know what? You just keep on going there. Bob Johnson would officially step away from BET as the CEO in 2005. And the critics of the network would even get louder, as some would notice that the network's core focuses that people fell in love with would disappear. Interesting enough, one of those critics would be the network's own co-founder, Sheila Johnson, who would hold nothing back in an interview with the Daily Beast years later. I don't watch it. I suggested to my kids that they don't watch it. When we started BET, it was going to be Ebony Magazine on television. We had public affairs programming, we had news, I had a show called Teen Summit, we had a large variety of programming. But the problem is the then video revolution started up. And then something started happening. And I didn't like it at all. And I remember during those days, we would sit up and watch these videos and decide which ones were going on and which ones were not. We got a lot of backlash from recording artists, and we had to start showing them. I didn't like the way women were being portrayed in these videos. Which brings us back to the conversation, do we want control or do we want the dough? According to Bob Johnson, his proudest feat with BET was that he made several black billionaires and gave stars a place to shine. But what would have happened if the Johnsons maintained the network's vision and helped raise the minds of black America through their programming? Or was their new status symbol as black billionaires more impactful? Unfortunately, the mentality to give our creations away is the same reason why we continue to be dismissed. If you don't own it, someone else makes the rules. This mentality is the same reason why our athletes make up of 73.2% of the NBA, helping employ a 58% white workforce compared to just the 12% of black employees in the NBA. So when it comes to our own security and custodial positions are all that's offered. Why doesn't LeBron launch his own shoe without Nike? And don't be surprised when I tell you that the black employees at Nike make up of just 6% of their workforce, according to the global data in 2021. So in the long run, how does the to sell over ownership mentality help the collective? Do we want representation or impact? Black-owned corporations are few, but they exist. And to their credit, both Johnsons now represent two of them, RLJ Lodging Trust and Salamander Hotels and Resorts. It appears that the act of selling out directly comes with building black, then selling it to another race. After BET, Bob Johnson would continue pushing ahead with ventures in sports, hotels, media, a failed BET clothing line, themed restaurants, and even attempted to launch a black-run airline called DC Air. In recent years, he would find himself stepping back into black media by helping launch the now all-black streaming platform with the AMC network. Now, Bob and Sheila Johnson wouldn't be the last to exit their mass black-owned companies. Other examples include Dr. Dre of Beats Electronics for a deal worth an estimate of $2.6 billion, Rochelle Dennis of Sundial Brands worth $1.6 billion, Jay-Z for Rockaware worth $204 million, George Foreman of Foreman Grill for $137 million, and Tristan Walker, the founder of Walker & Company, in a deal worth $100 million. In conclusion, money doesn't appear to buy out racism, but if you put it in the right hands, we can create new cash flows for people who helped build these companies. Yes, we're in the business to make money, but someone has to build and own these networks, corporations, and institutions to feed the collective. So that hopefully when we look up, our representation in the market increases and we can get beyond the discrimination obstacles that Johnson faced when he first started BET. Or we can continue to complain about who's not letting us in. Even here at Hype Plus, we are faced with the same reality. Do we maintain to keep it with the family, or do we sell it away like everyone else? The obstacles we face aren't easy, but when has being black ever been without turbulence? What Bob Johnson and others may have overlooked in the contract with white America, the terms are being black, you may never get a fair share of the pie. Read the fine print. Do you agree with Bob Johnson's selling of BET? Let's talk about it more in the comments below. For this Hype Plus special report, I'm John Appa.
If you would like to partner with Hype Plus and feature your business across our network, email us at partnerships@comedyhype.com.